Hi guys, this is Miss Pone, and today we are going to continue learning about quadratics written in vertex form. Our goal for today is to apply our knowledge of vertex form in order to graph quadratic functions. Now yesterday we learned about the a, h, and k value and how they affect our quadratic function. Today we're going to use that information in order to graph quadratics in vertex form. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first equation, our function, is f of x equals x squared minus 4. Now we always want to start out these problems identifying what our a, h, and k values are. In this particular function, our a value is 1, our h value is 0, and our k value is negative 4. Now we know that our vertex in vertex form is always h comma k. So in this case, our vertex is 0, negative 4. Once we have that vertex, we can go ahead and begin filling out our chart. Remember, we always put our vertex in the middle. Next, we need to pick x values on either side of the vertex. Two x values that are smaller than 0 are negative 1 and negative 2, and two values that are bigger than 0 are positive 1 and positive 2. Now we need to go ahead and evaluate our function for these values. I chose to do f of 1 first. So when you go ahead and plug in f of 1, you get 1 squared minus 4. Typing that in exactly like that on your calculator, you should get negative 3. Make sure you put that right away next to the x value so you don't forget. And using the idea of mirroring, or the axis of symmetry, we also know that f of negative 1 is negative 3 as well. Now one more x value to plug in. Let's do f of 2. When you plug in f of 2, you get the quantity 2 squared minus 4, which if you use your calculator right, it should be 0. So we know our last two y values are 0. The f of 2 is 0, just like we calculated, and then using the mirrored point, we know that f of negative 2 is also 0. Now that we have our table of values, we can go ahead and graph. Carefully plot your 5 points. I start with the vertex, go to either side, and then from there, draw in your function. It should look something like this. Make sure you have arrows on the end, because we know that the parabola continues on to infinity, either up in this case, or down if your a value is negative 1. Next, we want to ask ourselves, how is this different from the parent function? Remember, the parent function is f of x equals x squared. How does the graph that we just draw differ from the parent function? Either using your picture or your knowledge from yesterday, we can say that this graph is down 4 units because our k value is negative 4. Last but not least, we have to fill in our table. The first thing we naturally fill in is our vertex. We already calculated it, and it's 0, negative 4. Next, we go ahead and decide if we have a maximum or a minimum. In this case, our vertex is our lowest point, or a minimum. Axis of symmetry is the natural next step. Remember, it is an equation of a vertical line. All vertical lines are x equals, and in this case, it is x equals 0. Now, last but not least, we have domain and range. Domain represents all the x values on this function. All quadratic functions have a domain of all real numbers, so we have our fancy r. And then our range is y is greater than or equal to negative 4, because all of our y values that are bigger than negative 4 exist on this graph. Now, combining our knowledge of what we learned yesterday with what we know about graphing any quadratic equation, especially those in standard form, this shouldn't have been too difficult. But just in case it was, let's go through one example. Our next example is f of x equals negative quantity x plus 2 closed quantity squared. Again, just like before, we start up by identifying a, h, and k. Go ahead and take a moment, see if you can figure out what a, h, and k are. If you need to pause the video, do so now. Okay, hopefully you got the same values as me. That a is negative 1, h is negative 2, and k is 0. Once you've identified A, H, and K, you can go ahead and label your vertex. Your vertex, remember, is H comma K, or in this case, -2, 0. Once you've identified your vertex, you're going to go ahead and go to your table. Make sure you put that vertex right in the middle. Next, you pick two x values that are smaller than -2. In this case, I chose -3 and -4. And two x values that are bigger than -2, -1 and 0. Now we need to do some evaluating. We need to evaluate to figure out what the f of x column, or y, is. I chose to do f of -1. F of -1, when you do your substitution, looks like this. When you type that exactly into your calculator, you should be getting -1. Now we know, using our idea of mirroring, again, or the axis of symmetry, when x equals -3, f of x is -1. One more point to check. I like to always choose 0 because it's easy to do our substitution mathematically. F of 0 looks like this. Typed into your calculator should equal -4. So our last 2 points are -4. F of 0 is -4 by our calculations above, and f of -4 is -4 using the idea of mirroring or symmetry. Once you have your 5 points, you're going to go ahead and create your graph, plot your 5 points, and then go ahead and connect the dots, making sure you have arrows pointing down. Once your graph is drawn, you can go ahead and answer the question, how is this different from the parent function? Now this particular function has two changes, okay? Because a is -1, we know that there's an x-axis reflection. This is also shifted left 2 based off of the h value of -2. Last but not least, we have a chart to fill out. If you want to practice and check this, go ahead and pause the video now. Otherwise, follow along with me. Your vertex, -2, 0, we calculated before. Because this graph opens down, our point -2, 0 is a maximum point. Our axis of symmetry, or vertical line, is x equals -2. Domain is always all real numbers for all quadratic functions. And our range this time is less than or equal to 0. Y is less than or equal to 0. Because this graph opens down, it's all y values below 0. Now hopefully you guys understood this. There's 4 more problems for you to try. The answers are posted on Schoology. So work with each other, help each other out. Make sure you have those 4 problems done. Once you do have those 4 problems done, go ahead and show them to the sub, and the sub will get you tonight's homework. I will check both of these in tomorrow. So good luck. Remember, I'm available after school today, or you can always stop by the mark. And remember, you never know when you're going to need your algebra. So you need to brush up on those algebra skills, because you never know when you're going to need your algebra skills that we are learning today. Good luck, guys, and be good for the sub. I'll see you tomorrow.